Everybody, the Simple Handicap for Thursday, November 14th. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. Appreciate everybody who stopped by the Week 11 live stream preview yesterday on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. I'm hoping this is the week that we get past the 10,000 viewer mark. It's been very close the last couple of weeks. We might break through the threshold this week, so hopefully it gets through. But again, thank you to everybody who took the time to tune in. Lots of great Q&A questions. I'll follow up with another live stream a little bit later in the week. That'll likely be over on the RAS TikTok, but for now, we'll get to the market rundown and get you on your way bright and early this Thursday morning. Thursday night football tonight, Washington on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. Still Philly 3.5 for an expensive 3. Total in this game, 48.5, shaded towards the over. Brian Robinson, a full participant yesterday at Commanders practice. He is going to be back on the field. That is a big boost for the backfield for the Washington Commanders. Philadelphia Eagles activated Jordan Mailata from injured reserve, so he looks like he is on track to return potentially tonight. Get the official announcement on that later today. It's going to be a very fun game to watch, but one, as I mentioned yesterday on the live stream, very likely going to remain on the sidelines for in this spot. Interesting live betting game, if we're being honest, though. If you're looking at some of the Philadelphia Eagles splits, how they play when they're leading, how they play when they're trailing, how little they've had to play when they're trailing and being pushed, I think we might see some good live betting opportunities, which I'll drop over on the YouTube live stream video comment in the pinned section if anything does pop up. It's going to be hard to act on that, but certainly just keep it in the back of your mind. If you do see this Eagles team trailing and you get a little bit later in the game, you might see an uptick in tempo and aggression that we just haven't really seen from the Eagles so far this season. Green Bay on the road at the Chicago Bears. Bears money finally came into the market. It was lingering at 6 for the majority of the week. Yesterday, right around noon, after the limit bumps, we saw Bears money come in. 6s are gone, 5.5s leaning towards 5. We're seeing 5 flat at Chris as well as Buckeye, and we're seeing that at BOL as well. Total down to 40.5. It's been under money consistently throughout the week. Jordan Love, full participant at practice, but really injury front, it's all coming down to what you see from the Chicago Bears, especially on that offensive line. Nate Davis was cut as a backup. The names you want to keep an eye on, Tevin Jenkins, Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright. 2 of those 3 limited. Jenkins was a DNP yesterday at practice. So keep an eye on that Bears offensive line. Thomas Brown with his presser said everything you would expect to hear in his debut. It's going to be more energy. There were some pretty damning shots taken indirectly at Shane Waldron. Don't know what I'm buying into if there's going to be that big of a bump, but I think the biggest bump could potentially come from offensive line health and guys being back in this spot. Cleveland on the road at the New Orleans Saints. We saw more Browns money enter the market yesterday. A little bit later in the afternoon, any 1s that were left for the Saints as well as 1.5s, those were taken out. We're down to a pick'em for the first time this week over at Chris. Same thing at Buckeye. Market low coming down. It's nearly a 3-point move since that open at some books who had 3 later in Sunday evening as we were doing the live stream on that show. I've talked about the Browns several times this week. We're now down to a pick'em. In terms of injuries, Jerry Jeudy, full participant. Jedrick Wills, full participant. We'll see who they start, whether it's him or Jones at left tackle. That's more of an internal and a political thing. So that would be something to potentially keep an eye on, but it's not going to be anything that impacts the betting market or you're going to see anything move one way or the other. Big news for the New Orleans Saints as you're looking at Pete Werner, DNP, dealing with the hand injury. Good potential that he will not play in this game, which would bode well for the Browns' run game. Something to keep an eye on as the week progresses for the Saints. But so far it has been one-way money all week on the Browns, and you're getting a bit of a later week confirmation on that buy point as well yesterday. LA Rams on the road at the New England Patriots. Rams a 5-point favorite where it matters most at Chris Circa and Buckeye. We're seeing 4.5s leaning back towards the 5. It's been a bit of a back and forth. Initially, 5.5s were taken out on the Pats. We got down to 5, leaned a little bit yesterday to 4.5 at most books. And we saw once it settled at 4.5, we saw some buys back on the Rams, pushing this back up. 43 is now 44 on the total. When I'm looking at this game, there is going to be a little bit of dependency on the LA Rams O-line. Havenstein and Noteboom were both DNPs yesterday. My interpretation of it is 2 guys who have dealt with injuries. You have the short week. I'm not reading much into it with the Rams playing Monday. I would expect both of those guys in some fashion are participating. later today, and that's a boost for the Rams offensive line that is going to continue to look better this week and next week than it has really for the last month plus with these guys coming back and getting healthy. Saw him a bit in action on Monday night. Didn't look great against that Dolphins pass rush. Was a bit of a surprise. But I do think the team that's benefiting most from last week is the Pats. It was a game that we just talked about, the Bears O-line. They were banged up. They were down guys. The Pats were able to get a ton of pressure, which is something that was a bit unusual for them comparatively to other games this season. And I do think we see the Rams a little bit undervalued in this spot coming off the loss, and the Pats touch overvalued coming off of the win. And so in that pinned comment thread section on the YouTube live stream video, I did put in, once this got to 4.5, I did bet the Rams. Baltimore on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. 3 - 20 is the number across the board as there continues to be action on both sides of this game. Kind of very representative of what we saw last week with the Steelers game, and it was Pittsburgh that ultimately got bet late when the limits were highest. So far we've seen multiple buys on the Ravens push this up. A little bit of a resistance from the Steelers anytime it's leaned towards 3.5 at some books. Isaiah Likely back in a limited participation at practice yesterday. Kyle Hamilton, the DNP. He was in workout clothes on the field to the side working with trainers. Not typically a great sign for his availability or any player that goes through that for the week upcoming. His status certainly something to monitor when you consider how important he is to that defense and everything that they were able to do. Najee Harris at DNP yesterday at Steelers practice. We know Highsmith will miss. Those are two names you certainly have to watch as the injury report goes on. Harris, unclear what his status is going to be for Sunday. Las Vegas on the road at the Miami Dolphins. This was touching 8 at some shops. That got taken out. We're now down to a flat 7 across the board. Bit of Raiders money into the market, potentially buying into the new offensive coordinator and offensive staff overall and getting that elevated effort in this spot. 8s are taken out. We're back down to 7 total from 45 down to 44. Jacksonville on the road at the Detroit Lions. Lions up to a 14-point favorite. Was a flat -110 across the board. A little bit softer than that now. I got to say, we've talked about it all week. My expectation that Trevor Lawrence was going to play was never something that I believed in. I was fully expecting him to miss. This was 13.5 yesterday when we last spoke. The news came out yesterday morning, and it immediately caused the line to get up to 14. That surprised me because I must have missed something. Like, I was very certain that he was going to miss. Apparently others in the market, not so much. And so I'm not super surprised to see this from the 14 get hit back a little bit the other way with numbers being taken out in favor of the Jags, because it was just a bit of a surprising news for news that I thought was kind of known at this point. And so I'm not saying that this is going to be the final move, but perhaps there's just disagreement with that news actually mattering and not already being priced in when we think about this game from 10.5 up to 13.5. That, to me, was an adjustment for the injury at the QB. Beyond that, Tank Bigsby did not practice yesterday. Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Brandon Sheriff, all limited participants in practice yesterday, along with Tyson Campbell and Josh Hines-Allen. It is a banged-up Jaguars squad on both sides of the field for this game coming up on Sunday. So certainly an injury report to circle. You start seeing multiple guys from that list not able to play in this spot. This is certainly going to continue pushing forward past 14. But if it holds and some of these guys come back, it wouldn't be out of line, in my opinion, off of that news bumping it up to see that get taken back to 13.5. Minnesota on the road at the Tennessee Titans. This is still 6 for now for the Minnesota Vikings. I like the Titans. We talked about it on the live stream preview yesterday. We talked about it on the show quite a few times so far this week. In terms of the Minnesota Vikings and injuries that they are dealing with, we saw Sam Darnold pop up on the injury report with a hand injury. He was limited in participation yesterday. Didn't see a whole lot of movement off of that. It's kind of been a slow crawl back, and we know Aaron Jones dealing with the rib injury, something he suffered last week and is going to be dealing with going into this game as well, potentially pain tolerance-wise, keeping him a little bit less than 100%. Seattle on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. Been locked in all week here on the side. 6.5 is where it opened. 6.5 is still where it is. DK Metcalf back at practice. He is going to be good to go. That's a big boost. Seahawks coming out of the bye also have Abe Lucas back and practicing as well on a limited basis. And that is potentially a boost back for that offensive line, getting him back at the right tackle position. So another guy to watch for the Seattle Seahawks. George Kittle was a DNP for San Francisco, but expectations are that he is going to return back later in the week along with Nick Bosa. Atlanta Falcons on the road at the Denver Broncos. Denver still a 2-point favorite across the board, a number that I would anticipate getting up to 2.5 total in this game. Still holding steady at 44, leaning slightly towards the 44.5. Kansas City on the road at the Buffalo Bills. No practice for Dalton Kincaid as anticipated. Talked about some of the accounts and how that's being reported yesterday. Trending towards not playing in this game. Keon Coleman, we know, is going to be out. In terms of Kansas City, some good news with Smith-Schuster returning back in a limited fashion yesterday after dealing a couple weeks with the hamstring injury. Pacheco is back at practice, but there's no way, in my opinion, that he is going to play in this game as significant as it is. I think Smith-Schuster would be the name to keep your eye on for Chiefs fans as you watch this number still at 2.5. Got down to 2 at some spots yesterday. Has been kind of bouncing back and forth between those two numbers. I do think injury news and how this shapes out, if Kincaid is going to miss, we do see some Chiefs money later in the week. Cincinnati Bengals on the road at the LA Chargers, still 1.5 or 2, depending where you look for the LA Chargers. A little bit of LA money came in yesterday. There was a few more 1 showing yesterday afternoon. Those turned into 1.5s. Chris still holding steady at 1 minus 115, as is BetOnline, the 2 lowest books in the market. The total saw over money. We released over 46.5 on Monday. We see this now up to 48, got back down to 47, and there was some over money that came into the market yesterday. Indianapolis Colts on the road at the New York Jets. Jets up to a 4-point favorite across the board with the total from 44 down to 43.5. And what's interesting in this is we have 2 kind of subjective stories to keep an eye on. One is, what is the state of the Indianapolis Colts locker room? You're dealing with Anthony Richardson now being named the starter, and the web and the path and what Shane Steichen has done to weave his way into this decision is pretty incredible when you think just 2 days ago this was being spoken about as Joe Flacco's team for the rest of the season. Now he's reverted on that after benching Richardson a couple of weeks ago. What a mess that you have going on in Indy. And there were guys on the team for the Colts that sounded like they didn't want Richardson to be starting anyway after he subbed himself out of the game. There was potential leadership concerns with that as well. So that's a big situation brewing. On the other side, we have Jeff Ulbrich for the New York Jets coming out and saying, we're going full pads in practice all week long. We have to improve the tackling. He put on a tackling presentation. Not entirely sure what a tackling presentation represents. Was he out there rekindling some of his playing career past and hitting guys? I don't know. Maybe it was a PowerPoint. It's an interesting verbiage to hear about that, but it is something that I would look at from a handicapping perspective and say, hey, here's a Jets defense that looked at times like they have quit the last couple of weeks. And last week against Arizona was embarrassing. If you get a heightened tackling effort, similar to a team we spoke about last week in the Saints, where you get a heightened effort on defense, things tend to kind of bounce your way. And certainly Richardson and the Colts have had their share of issues turning the ball over. And so if this is a Jets team that's a little bit more aggressive, perhaps bought in on defense, which has been the big issue for them, as bad as the offense has been at times, it's really been the defense causing the majority of the trouble. If this extra practice during the week elevates the standard up, perhaps that warrants the money that has been coming in on the New York Jets from 3.5 now out to 4. They just continue to get bet in the market. Total from 44, holding steady at 44, trending slightly lower towards 43.5 at Chris, Buckeye, and FanDuel as well. Monday Night Football, it's Houston on the road at the Dallas Cowboys. 7.5 holds steady on the side. 42.5 holds steady on the total. Fully expecting Nico Collins to be good to go each day in practice this week. As mentioned yesterday, the Dallas Cowboys will be starting Cooper Rush in this game and not Trey Lance. When we're looking at injuries for the Cowboys, we'll get a lot of updates on the defensive status for a number of starters later today in their first practice report of the week. That will do it for me this morning. Hope everybody has a fantastic Thursday. We'll chat to you bright and early again tomorrow to wrap up the week here on the podcast feed.